Welcome to Really American. I am Michael Hayne. So, climate change reared its ugly head over the weekend in the form of Hurricane Helene, which battered much of the Southeast, particularly the states of North Carolina. Yes, climate change. That concept that every scientist admits the existence of, and yet Republicans just can't wrap their tiny little heads around it. Perhaps they got their degrees in climatology from Trump University. I don't know. Anyway, the destruction was caused millions of dollars of damage. And of course, real leaders, Democrats, and even some Republicans, the few remaining sane ones left, were doing everything to step up their efforts to ensure that, their state's constituents were safe and that all of the proper measures were being taken. That can only mean that Trumpy Dumpty, the criminal insane clown, was doing nothing but creating more division and doing what he does best and politicizing everything. He puts out a post on Failing Pathetic Truth Social that the federal response wasn't enough, that I guess Sleepy Joe wasn't helping out states like North Carolina and Georgia. Well, guess what? Of course, no facts, no evidence, not a freaking modicum of credibility to it. And in fact, a Biden spokesman completely called out Trump and spanked him by stating this. Andrew Bates, a spokesperson for President Joe Biden, quickly responded to Trump's claims. Bates pointed out that Trump's statement doesn't match reality. Yeah, reality is another marriage that he never kept. He shared what Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia said. The president just called me yesterday afternoon and he said, "Hey, what do you need?" He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate.
So I just spoke. The president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, "Hey, what do you need?" And I told him, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that. But
as if we needed yet another reminder as to why 80 million plus Americans voted for President Biden, why tons and millions of Americans are enthusiastic, about Kamala Harris, and why many Republicans, even former Trump officials, are getting behind Kamala Harris. It's because of shit like this. It's because we actually wanted to elect a sound, responsible leader who does presidential things, who is presidential, who is normal. So in times of crises and natural disasters, well, I can think of no bigger natural disaster than Trump, but other natural disasters like hurricanes, they are readily available. They are using the office of the presidency for good to actually help out people in need, regardless of whether they voted for him. And Trumpy Dumpty, as you know, he has a history of doing this. He did this when he was president during the wildfires in California. Like, what did he that's Democrat-run states. Probably the immigrants set the fires. Let's rake wildfires. So again, this is why 80 million plus Americans got behind Joe Biden.
Well, I think this is more of a management situation. If you look at other countries, you go to other countries in Europe, Austria and Finland and numerous countries, and I talk to the heads. They're forest nations. They're in forests, and they don't have problems like this. And they have very explosive trees, but they don't have problems like this. So I view that as number one. That's something we can do something about quickly. When you get into climate change, well, is India going to change its ways? And is China going to change its ways? And Russia? Is Russia going to change its ways? So you have a lot of countries that are going to have to change because they make up, we're just a small speck. They make up a big preponderance of the pollution. And so you have to get them to do it. And nobody ever talks about that.
In China, and nobody was talking about it. Yes, actually, all world leaders were talking about it. It was Barack Obama who was addressing this and helped put forth the Paris climate deal. The very one that your human herpes sore, syphilitic, alcoholic thumb, white nationalist Steve Bannon helped destroy when you pulled out of that. Oh, and who can forget when Trumpy Dumpty did this in Puerto Rico following their hurricane? what really doesn't make sense to me, and this is like how you know Trump's bullshit is getting worse and worse when it's like making even less sense. Because blaming Democrats for ignoring Republican areas, how does that hold up? Because when you think about it, North Carolina, a lot of Republicans there. In fact, if the state went to Trump in 2020, although now it's looking more and more and like it's going into Kamala Harris, many Republican insiders think Kamala's going to win North Carolina, that this is now in play for her. But regardless, most of the state happens to be Republican. So why would they be excluded from relief efforts? So again, just playing divisive politics at a time when people are at their most vulnerable. Now, Biden spokesperson Andrew Bates has actually, been a very significant voice in terms of the Biden administration focusing on recovery efforts. Trump's history of spreading nonstop misinformation during disasters like COVID, bleach, all that nonsense. It was Andrew Bates who was actually setting the record straight and actually demonstrating what true leadership actually is during crises. And in keeping with that motif of sticking with adults with a fully functional frontal lobe, let's hear what Kamala Harris had to say regarding the hurricane.
I know that everyone here sends their thoughts and prayers for the folks who have been so devastated by that hurricane and the ensuing events in Florida, in Georgia, the Carolinas, and other impacted states. And we know that so many have been impacted, some have died. But I want to thank everyone for doing everything you can to think about them, send them your thoughts, send them your prayers. I want to thank the first responders who have done so much.
And that, folks, was a wonderful preview of the thoughtful, sturdy, steady, competent, and caring leadership that America so desperately needs if we are ever to recover from the actual shitstorm that is MAGA. Anyway, I am Michael Hayne. This is Really American. Please subscribe to our channel and check me out on my latest TikTok at Mike Hayne Comedian. Talk to you later.